What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Tony Khan is talking that talk. He wants to go to war with WWE, and we got some very interesting details on this interview that he did with Robbie Fox from Barstool Sports. Oh, he wants the smoke, but I think Tony Khan is going to be dishing out something that we've never seen coming, so we're going to talk about it in this video. And yes, he does say that Raw sucks. We also have some very interesting news on CM Punk possibly headed to New Japan Pro Wrestling. And while we're talking about Tony Khan and this massive story in regards to competition with WWE, we got to talk about WWE Raw because their attendance numbers were absolutely atrocious. All right, guys, if you want more videos like this, I would greatly appreciate your subscription. But for now, let's just jump right into the stories. CM Punk recently did an interview in regards to New Japan Pro Wrestling, and he has very well doubled down on his opinions staying in AEW. Obviously, there's a pandemic. It requires quarantines and things like that. New Japan is in the middle of the G1, but basically CM Punk was doubling down his interest for New Japan. And as you guys know, when it comes to New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW, the forbidden door is entirely open. But the real question is, will we see CM Punk in a New Japan ring? And honestly, I do think at some point it will happen. I just don't think it's going to happen in the near future. Now, of course, with CM Punk doubling down on his interest, it is very interesting because initially when he joined AEW, he specifically said that he was an AEW guy. But as you guys can imagine, there are tons of dream matchups that we would all love to see with CM Punk headed to Japan. So I think it's fair to say that if CM Punk were to compete in New Japan Pro Wrestling, not only would we be getting some dream matchups, but I think this also opens the door further for some of these matches to also take place on AEW television. One of the best things I personally would like to see here, I think it's my personal favorite outcome in this regard. I think CM Punk should have a best of 3 series with somebody from New Japan. For example, we can say Okada. So CM Punk versus Okada in the United States, CM Punk versus Okada in Japan, and then they can do a final rubber match at some point. That's ideally what I would like to see, but I think this is great news. I think CM Punk going to Japan would be great for pro wrestling, and I think fans would really, really enjoy seeing this. So personally, why not do that? You know, that's something I think should happen. Obviously, he has some interest, and it's hard to have a little bit more, with CM Punk in his situation, it's hard for him to drop everything and just go to Japan because, again, quarantines are still a thing. It's travel restrictions and whatnot. It's a very, very tough world right now. But I do think at some point we do see CM Punk in Japan, and I think that would be the best thing for business. All right, guys, in the next story of the day, WWE Raw attendance numbers not looking so good. Guys, since they've been back with fans in attendance, things just haven't been too good. Now, this past week, October 11th, in San Francisco, California, there was only 3,995 tickets distributed, and the capacity only allowed for 4,200 seats. This is actually the lowest attended Raw since returning to the road. Now, of course, the reason why I want to mention this is because clearly WWE Raw is not the flagship show. It is the secondary show for WWE. But most importantly, WWE struggling with selling tickets to Raw says a lot about the product. I know often, we talk about, ratings and stuff. But if you want to know whether or not a product is popular or, it's increasing popularity, then look no further than live attendance. One of the big things during WWE in the pandemic era was that WWE didn't have fans in attendance. And don't get me wrong, they've had different shows where they've had 10,000 plus in the seats, but it just says a lot about the product specifically when there is a decline, and an incredibly big decline. In the last few events for WWE, they've had 6,500, 7,900, 5,400, and now it dropped underneath 5,000. It's a little bit concerning to see that's happening to WWE. I know people talk about ratings, but when you see WWE's live attendance drop, that's a huge concern because typically WWE's live attendance is actually really good. Now, on the other hand, we got to compare this to SmackDown, which sold out 19,000 plus seats just a couple of weeks ago. So just kind of keep that in mind. Raw attendance isn't looking good, and this is not something I'm shocked or surprised with, but it kind of goes into our final story of the day, which is Tony Khan calling out WWE. Now, if you guys didn't know, Tony Khan was just recently on Robbie Fox from Barstool Sports. He was on his little podcast. He did an interview. They were talking a little bit. And Tony Khan basically dished it all out, which this is a little bit of a different tone for Tony Khan because Tony Khan immediately took shots at WWE. He asked Robbie Fox about, well, you know, they were talking about the 30-minute lead-in. And basically, he asked Robbie if he saw Raw. And he just believes that, you know, he is going to have a better show Friday. He's not sure about the ratings or the statistics, and he's pretty adamant that, like, there is a possibility that AEW can be, you know, beaten in that regard. But he firmly believes that AEW Rampage Friday night will blow SmackDown out of the water. But what was really interesting here is that he went as far as actually saying that WWE Raw this past week sucked. Now, the fact that Tony Khan is taking shots at WWE like this, it's different from his typical competitive spirit. You know, he's been very, very, very aggressive with this idea of competition with WWE lately. And in the beginning, it necessarily wasn't like that. And I truly think Tony Khan has some aces up his sleeve for this upcoming episode, this upcoming Friday. But here's the thing. If Tony Khan is going to call out WWE like this, and I think it's cool, you guys can go back and forth, call your shots, whatever it may be, just understand that if you are going to go into war with WWE, there is no room for error. Because we all know that when WWE actually tries to put on a good wrestling show, they put on a hell of a show. And we know the same goes for AEW. So that means AEW can't do this as a one-off. That's my point to this. I think AEW is a great show, but if they have a really, really, really good show Friday, it can't just be a one-time thing. That's the only thing I'm going to say in regards to that. I think competition is beautiful. I think it's going to force AEW to really work hard and excel, just like it will to WWE. WWE has Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns. They're doing Becky Lynch versus, well, it just goes to show you how forgettable WWE. WWE is playing in a match against Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks, and I almost forgot about that. Keep in mind, that's going to be the match that goes 30 minutes uninterrupted. So WWE took the first step by trying to counter-program AEW. AEW announced that Rampage is going to have a buy-in show for free on YouTube. It's going to include Minoru Suzuki versus Bryan Danielson and Lee Moriarty against Bobby Fish. So keep that in mind. Tony Khan says Raw sucks. He believes that AEW Rampage will beat SmackDown. All eyes will be on AEW to see if they deliver. But yes, if they don't, just understand that it's not a good look for Tony Khan. I don't have any doubt here. I think AEW is going to do great. And quite honestly, I think SmackDown is going to be a very enjoyable show. My final prediction, both shows will absolutely do terrible with ratings. And that's because the Friday night time slot is terrible. But I think we're going to get two great shows, and as a fan, that is really exciting. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. My name is Zango, and thank you for watching DPW.